In today's political landscape, moments of raw honesty and unfiltered confrontation are rare, but when they happen, they reveal more than hours of scripted debates ever could. This speech dives into the explosive moment when Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett called out Congressman Jeff Van Drew for his dramatic shift on ISWAP abuse reports, a flip that left the room stunned and the public questioning motives, integrity, and accountability. This wasn't just a clash of opinions, it was a clash of principles, exposing the tension between truth and political convenience. As Jasmine Crockett confronted Van Drew with facts, history, and his own previous words, the exchange became a defining moment that sparked nationwide conversation. This is more than politics, it's a reminder of why transparency matters and how quickly the truth can turn the tables. Let's break down why this moment resonated so powerfully and what it reveals about leadership today. Jasmine Crockett exposed Jeff Van Drew's contradictory stance on ICE abuse reports in a way that instantly shifted the energy of the room. Because she didn't just challenge his claims, she challenged the pattern behind them. Her approach was sharp, fact-driven, and grounded in a clear understanding of the historical record. She brought forward not only what he had said recently, but also what he had previously supported, endorsed, or defended. By putting those statements side by side, she created a contrast powerful enough to make the inconsistency impossible to ignore. Her delivery wasn't aggressive for the sake of drama, it was precise, intentional, and designed to highlight a truth that had been dismissed or obscured for far too long. Van Drew's sudden shift on ICE abuse reports was presented as a simple policy difference. She framed it as a matter of principle, a question of whether elected officials should be allowed to erase their own documented positions without explanation. As she spoke, Crockett demonstrated how political convenience often disguises itself as concern, especially when officials alter their positions to align with the shifting winds of party loyalty rather than the needs of the people they represent. She reminded everyone that ICE abuse reports weren't new, nor were they partisan creations. These reports came from watchdog organizations, internal investigations, and individuals who had first-hand experience with mistreatment. By emphasizing this history, she highlighted that Van Drew's former stance wasn't accidental. It had been informed by evidence, supported by testimony, and grounded in bipartisan concern. The flip, therefore, wasn't about new information but about new alliances. Her method of exposing this flip was particularly effective because she used Van Drew's own past statements as the foundation of her argument. She read his words, cited his previous positions, and contrasted them with his current claims. This structure left little room for rebuttal because it was opinion versus opinion. It was record versus rhetoric. It forced listeners to confront the reality that political figures sometimes rely on the public's short memory, hoping previous statements fade quietly into the background. Crockett refused to allow that, refusing to let the moment pass without showing what accountability looks like when executed with clarity. This moment mattered because it captured something deeper about modern political discourse. Many officials rebrand themselves when it becomes convenient, and those shifts often go unchallenged. Crockett's confrontation was a reminder that someone is paying attention, that the public deserves honesty, and that integrity requires consistency. She didn't claim that politicians can never change their minds. Instead, she highlighted that changes must be rooted in evidence, not in personal ambition. By calling out the shift without hesitation, she demonstrated how elected leaders should defend their positions, not with vague explanations, but with transparency about what changed and why. The exchange also revealed how narratives around immigration and enforcement can be manipulated to appeal to specific audiences. Van Drew's flip was framed as concern for law enforcement and national security. Yet Crockett illuminated how his previous stance had been based on documented abuses that harmed individuals in custody. Her ability to draw attention to the human impact rather than the political talking points strengthened her message and made the contradiction even more striking. She emphasized that abuse reports were not fabrications but real accounts from real people, and ignoring them for political advantage was a betrayal of the responsibility entrusted to elected officials. Throughout her challenge, Crockett showed how powerful truth becomes when delivered without fear. Her tone conveyed conviction, not confrontation. Her facts carried the argument, not emotion. Even those unfamiliar with either politician could sense the imbalance between a well-supported truth and a flimsy political repositioning. That imbalance is what made the moment spread quickly online, generating discussions about political courage, accountability, and the need for leaders who stand on consistent values. By the time she finished, the room's attention had shifted entirely. What began as a typical congressional exchange had transformed into a defining moment that left Van Drew with little ground to stand on. Crockett achieved something rare. She made inconsistency visible, undeniable, and uncomfortable. She reminded viewers that public servants aren't just responsible for their current words, they're responsible for the entire record of what they've stood for. The confrontation underscored the importance of consistency, accountability, and factual integrity in congressional discussions on immigration and human rights. And the way Jasmine Crockett handled the moment showed why these principles matter more than political theater or partisan allegiance. When she challenged Jeff Van Drew, she wasn't simply engaging in a verbal clash. She was pointing to a deeper truth about how narratives around immigration can be shaped, distorted, or selectively emphasized depending on who benefits. Her insistence on sticking to facts and documented history reminded everyone watching that elected officials are not just opinion shapers, they are record holders, and that record cannot be rewritten on demand to suit temporary political needs. Her approach demonstrated that consistency is not about clinging stubbornly to one viewpoint forever, but about grounding every shift, every statement, and every decision in transparent reasoning and evidence. Crockett highlighted how discussions about ICE, immigration, enforcement, and abuse reports require an unwavering commitment to factual accuracy because these topics involve real human beings who are affected by policy decisions in the most personal and often painful ways. Factual integrity is essential in these conversations because misinformation or politically driven distortions don't just lead to bad debates, they lead to harmful policies and overlooked abuses. When Van Drew shifted his stance, Crockett framed the issue not as a simple political flip, but as a disservice to those whose experiences had already been documented and validated. These were not hypothetical abuse claims but thoroughly investigated reports, and shifting away from acknowledging them had the effect of erasing the suffering of people who had already been harmed. Her focus on consistency conveyed the message that leaders cannot acknowledge abuse when it fits their agenda and ignore it when it conflicts with new political loyalties. She pointed out, implicitly and explicitly, that public trust depends on this very consistency. When politicians display a pattern of adopting positions based purely on convenience, it signals that their loyalty lies not with truth or justice, but with whatever narrative currently benefits them. Crockett's challenge to Van Drew illuminated this danger by showing how quickly a leader can switch from condemning abuses to defending the agency that committed them, all without offering a substantive explanation for the change. This kind of inconsistency undermines the credibility of congressional oversight and makes it harder for the public to believe that leaders are acting in good faith. Crockett's emphasis on factual integrity served as a reminder that oversight is only meaningful when it is built on honesty, transparency, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. The moment also highlighted the essential role of accountability in these discussions. Accountability means holding leaders responsible not just for their mistakes but for their words, their voting record, and the positions they take over time. Crockett made it clear that when someone in a position of power reverses their stance on issues as serious as human rights, the public deserves an explanation grounded in facts, not political expediency. Her questioning drew attention to the fact that Van Drew's shift seemed to coincide with a realignment of his political identity rather than any new evidence or developments in the situation. This observation raised the broader concern that political self-interest could overshadow the truth, especially in highly charged debates about immigration, law enforcement, and national security. In calling out this shift, Crockett implicitly argued that accountability is not optionally, is foundational to democratic governance. Without accountability, political debates become meaningless because they no longer reflect genuine beliefs or commitments. Instead, they become vehicles for posturing, fundraising, and party loyalty. Crockett's insistence on revisiting Van Drew's past statements forced the conversation back into the realm of documented reality, where public officials must answer for their own words. This grounding in facts is what gives congressional hearings their power, and her ability to restore that grounding in that moment showed why leaders who consistently tell the truth, even when inconvenient, are so essential. The exchange further revealed why factual integrity is non-negotiable in discussions on human rights. Abuse reports involving ICE detainees are not partisan talking points. They come from investigations, internal audits, eyewitness accounts, and documentation from multiple administrations. To deny or overlook these reports simply because political dynamics have shifted does more than distort the narrative. It erases the lived experiences of vulnerable people whose voices are often suppressed. Crockett's challenge brought those experiences back into focus, reminding listeners that these individuals are not political symbols but human beings who deserve to be acknowledged, protected, and defended. Ignoring reports of abuse doesn't make them disappear. It only makes it easier for them to continue. Her insistence on consistency also underscored how political discourse can shape public perception. When elected officials change their stance without acknowledging why, it influences how the public understands the issue. If a leader who once spoke out against abuse suddenly acts as though the issue was exaggerated or fabricated, it can sow confusion, undermine accountability, and contribute to a culture where truth becomes flexible. Crockett rejected this flexibility by grounding her argument in the historical record and refusing to let the conversation drift into politically convenient distortions. Her commitment to factual accuracy helped anchor the debate in reality, demonstrating how powerful truth becomes when delivered without hesitation. The moment also served as a broader commentary on the role of integrity in public office. Integrity means saying what you mean, standing by your principles, being transparent about why you change your mind, and refusing to manipulate facts to suit the moment. Crockett's exposure of Vandrew's contradiction highlighted what happens when this integrity is missing. It becomes easier for leaders to present themselves one way when it benefits them and another way when circumstances change. And this unpredictability weakens the foundation of public trust. Crockett's ability to contrast Vandrew's current claims with his documented history showed how essential it is for leaders to maintain a clear, honest, and consistent record. This moment resonated because it reminded viewers that truth still matters in political spaces often dominated by theatrics. Public officials may attempt to reshape narratives, but the record remains. Crockett's insistence on pointing to that record emphasized that the truth is not something that can be rewritten at will. The truth is anchored in documents, statements, investigations, and history, and anyone attempting to alter it must be held accountable. The moment went viral because it showcased a powerful pushback against political opportunism, and audiences immediately recognized the significance of what Jasmine Crockett did when she confronted Jeff Vandrew. People are used to seeing politicians dodge questions, redirect blame, or hide behind vague talking points. What they're not used to seeing is someone directly calling out the inconsistencies, contradictions, and strategic shifts that often get swept under the rug. Crockett's willingness to address the flip head-on created a moment that felt raw, honest, and unfiltered, and that authenticity is exactly what people gravitate toward, in an era where political conversations often feel rehearsed or manipulative. Her straightforward approach resonated deeply because she didn't rely on theatrics, she relied on facts, record, and clarity. This pushback stood out because Crockett framed the issue as bigger than one politician's change of opinion. She highlighted how political opportunism erodes public trust, especially when leaders change positions not because new evidence has emerged, but because aligning with a different narrative serves their interests. By emphasizing the suddenness and convenience of Vandrew's reversal, she drew attention to the broader problem of elected officials prioritizing their political standing over consistency or accountability. People saw in this exchange not just a clash between two politicians, but an example of someone defending the integrity of the public record. That's why the moment resonated beyond the committee remit, represented the frustration many feel when they see leaders switch sides with no explanation while expecting the public not to notice. Crockett's voice became a stand-in for viewers who were tired of political double standards. Her calm but pointed tone signaled that she wasn't engaging in a personal attack. She was exposing a pattern of behavior that deserved scrutiny. In a political climate where misinformation spreads quickly and narratives change overnight, her insistence on holding Vandrew to his own words felt refreshing and necessary. Audiences saw it as someone finally saying what many have been thinking, that leaders cannot rewrite their past positions simply because they now serve a different purpose. Political opportunism thrives when it goes unchallenged, and Crockett made sure that didn't happen. The reason the moment gained so much traction is also tied to how clearly it illustrated the difference between principled leadership and performance. When one politician stands firm on verifiable facts while another attempts to reshape their own history, the contrast becomes impossible to ignore. Crockett didn't need to raise her voice or use dramatic language. The strength of her argument came from the truth itself. Viewers recognized the imbalance and felt drawn to the courage it takes to call out inconsistency in a public setting where consequences are real and reputations are at stake. This exchange also highlighted how political opportunism can distort important issues like immigration enforcement and human rights. When a leader's stance swings dramatically based on shifting alliances, it sends a message that the issue itself is secondary. Crockett's pushback reminded everyone that these discussions involve real people affected by policy decisions, people whose experiences shouldn't be dismissed because siding with them is no longer politically convenient. Her emphasis on the documented abuse reports underscored how political flips can silence uncomfortable truths, and pushing back against that silence was part of what made the moment so impactful. At the heart of why the moment spread so widely is the sense of accountability Crockett demanded. She showed that political conversations don't have to be vague or evasive. They can be direct, transparent, and rooted in reality. Her confidence in challenging a colleague's inconsistency gave viewers a rare example of what it looks like when someone uses their platform to elevate truth rather than narrative. This authenticity, paired with her precise delivery, created a moment people wanted to replay, share, and discuss.